The sound that woke her wasn't the thunder rattling the glass walls of the skyscraper, but the distinct, heavy click of a lock turning. Elena opened her eyes, disoriented, realizing too late that she wasn't at her desk, but curled up in the massive leather chair of the CEO's private office. And standing by the door, hand still on the deadbolt, was Alistair Sterling, watching her with a gaze that could melt the steel beams of the building. Subscribe now for daily billionaire CEO romances, secret kisses, and luxury love stories. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo in the vast, silent office. She tried to sit up, but the depth of the leather chair held her captive, sinking her deeper into a scent that was overwhelmingly him-aged whiskey, crisp paper, and a sharp, metallic tongue of rain. The room was dark, illuminated only by the lightning that periodically slashed across the city's skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, dancing shadows across the expensive mahogany furniture. She had only meant to rest her eyes for a moment while waiting for the final reports to print, but the exhaustion of 3 consecutive double shifts had pulled her under. Now she was trespassing on the throne of the most feared man in finance, and he had just locked them in. Alistair Sterling didn't move from the door immediately. He simply stood there, a dark silhouette against the dim light of the corridor seeping in from underneath the frame. He was still wearing his suit, though the jacket was unbuttoned, revealing the stark white of his dress shirt, which seemed to glow in the semi-darkness. He looked tired, but it was a predatory kind of exhaustion, the look of a wolf that has been hunting all night and has finally found something interesting in its den. His eyes, usually cold and dismissive during board meetings, were currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He wasn't angry, she realized with a jolt. He was curious, and that was infinitely more dangerous. "Comfortable, Miss Rostova." His voice was a low rumble, smooth and dark like the coffee he drank black every morning. It wasn't a question she was meant to answer, but rather an observation of her vulnerability. Elena scrambled to push herself upright, her hands slipping on the buttery soft leather of the armrests, her hair likely a disaster of static and sleep. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't hear you come in," she stammered, her voice thick with sleep. "I was just waiting for the Tokyo Exchange files. I must have drifted off." She made a move to stand, to retreat to the safety of her own cubicle, but he took a single deliberate step forward. "Stay," he commanded, the word cutting through the air with the precision of a scalpel. It wasn't shouted. Alistair Sterling never shouted. He didn't have to. "You look far too comfortable to move, and I haven't decided what to do with you yet." He walked slowly toward the desk, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug that cost more than her entire education. As he moved closer, the scent of the storm clinging to his coat hit her, mixing with the warm, masculine smell of the office. He walked around the desk, not to sit, but to lean against the edge of it, towering over her as she sat trapped in his chair. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he might touch her. Instead, he picked up a stray lock of her hair that had fallen across the armrest, rubbing the strands between his thumb and forefinger as if testing the quality of silk. "My chair suits you," he murmured, his eyes tracking the movement of his own hand. "Most people look small in it." Swallowed up. "You look like you belong." The compliment, if it was one, was a double-edged sword, implying a closeness that didn't exist between a CEO and a temporary executive assistant. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the glass like gravel, sealing them into this high-altitude bubble. The office felt suspended in the sky, a world apart from the wet streets 40 floors below. Elena looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. "I should go, sir. The security team will be doing rounds." Alistair smirked, a rare, dangerous expression that transformed his severe face. "I sent security home an hour ago, Elena, and I just locked the door. No one is coming." He leaned down, placing his hands on the armrests on either side of her, caging her in without making contact. His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises and feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "It's just you, me, and the storm," he whispered, "and a very long night ahead." He wasn't trapped in the office with her. She was trapped in his world. The silence that followed his declaration was heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on Elena's arms stand up. Alistair pushed himself off the armrests and walked over to the small bar cart in the corner, the crystal decanters catching the flashes of lightning. The sound of glass clinking against glass was sharp and deliberate. "Whiskey," he offered, not turning around. "It will wake you up or put you back to sleep. Either way, it helps." "I'm on the clock, Mr. Sterling," Elena replied, trying to regain some semblance of professional composure, though her heart was still racing. She smoothed her skirt, feeling foolish for the wrinkle the leather chair had left. Alistair chuckled, a low sound that vibrated in the quiet room. "You are on my clock, Elena, and I say you need a drink." He turned, holding 2 glasses filled with amber liquid. He walked back and placed one on the coaster on his desk, right in front of her. He took a sip of his own, his eyes never leaving her face over the rim of the glass. "Why are you really here?" he asked, his tone shifting from playful to analytical. "The Tokyo files were uploaded to the server 3 hours ago. I got the notification on my phone." Elena froze. He knew. He had known the moment he walked in that her excuse was flimsy. She gripped the armrests, deciding that the truth was her only option. "I didn't want to go home," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "My heater broke, and my landlord won't fix it until Monday. It's freezing in my apartment." Alistair's expression darkened, the playfulness evaporating instantly. He set his glass down with a thud that made the liquid jump. "You're sleeping in my office because you don't have heat." He looked offended, as if her discomfort was a personal insult to his company's efficiency. He paced to the window, looking out at the deluge. "That is unacceptable." He turned back to her, his silhouette framed by the lightning. "Hero work for Sterling Capital. You shouldn't be freezing in a slum. It's not a slum, it's just ... double quotes." Elena started to defend her humble life, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "It doesn't matter. You are here now, and you are warm." He looked at the chair she was still occupying. "And, apparently, you find my furniture conducive to rest." He walked back to her, the look in his eyes softening slightly, though the intensity remained. "Drink the whiskey, Elena. It's a 50-year-old single malt. It will warm your blood better than any heater." She reached for the glass, her fingers trembling slightly. As she took a sip, the liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, settling as a warm weight in her stomach. Alistair watched her swallow, his gaze lingering on her throat. It was an intimate scrutiny, one that made her feel exposed despite being fully buttoned up in her office blouse. "I have work to do," he said, suddenly shifting gears. "And since you are here, and you are awake, you can help me." It wasn't a request, it was a command, but it was also an invitation to stay in his orbit. He walked around the desk and pulled a sleek black laptop from his bag, setting it down on the leather surface, uncomfortably close to where she sat. "I need to review the merger contracts for the morning. I need a second pair of eyes." Sharp eyes. He looked at her pointedly. "Are you awake now, Elena?" "Wide awake, sir," she replied, the whiskey and the adrenaline sharpening her senses. He nodded, satisfied. He didn't ask her to move to the visitor's chair on the other side of the desk. Instead, he dragged a heavy armchair from the corner and placed it right next to hers, on his side of the desk. He sat down, his thigh brushing against the armrest of her chair, closing the distance between them to mere inches. He wasn't sending her away. He was pulling her deeper into the inner circle. Working with Alistair Sterling was like trying to drink from a fire hose. His mind moved at a velocity that was terrifying, jumping from clause to clause, spotting errors that Alina hadn't even grazed. But tonight, the pace was different. The storm outside seemed to slow time down inside the office. The only light came from the glow of the laptop screen and a single brass desk lamp he had switched on, creating a pool of warm, gold light that encompassed them both. They sat, shoulder to shoulder, poring over the digital documents. Every time he pointed something out on the screen, his arm would brush against hers, sending a jolt of awareness through her body. He had rolled up his sleeves, exposing forearms that were surprisingly muscular, corded with veins and dusted with dark hair. It was a stark contrast to the polished executive she saw during the day. This was Alistair in the trenches, raw and focused. "Look at this clause," he murmured, leaning in closer so his breath fanned across her cheek. "They're trying to hide the liability in the subtext. Sneaky. Heat smelled of expensive soap and the lingering scent of the rain. A clean, masculine fragrance that was intoxicating." Alina forced herself to focus on the words on the screen, blinking rapidly. "I see it," she said, her voice sounding breathless to her own ears. Paragraph 4. "The indemnity limit is too low." Alistair turned his head, and suddenly they were nose to nose. She could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheekbones. He didn't pull back. "Good catch," he said softly. "Most people miss that. Even my senior VPs miss that." His praise was rare currency, and it made her flush with pleasure. He held her gaze for a beat too long, the air between them thickening with unspoken questions. He turned back to the screen, but he didn't move away. In fact, he seemed to have shifted closer, his knee now resting against the side of her chair. It was a casual contact, easily dismissed as accidental, but nothing Alistair Sterling did was ever accidental. He was a man who calculated risk and reward in billion-dollar increments. If he was touching her, it was because he wanted to. "You have a good mind, Alina," he said, typing a comment into the document with aggressive keystrokes. "Why are you hiding in the assistant pool?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not hiding," she defended. "I'm working my way up. I just started 6 months ago." Alistair stopped typing. 6 months. "And in 6 months, you're the only one here at midnight during a storm." He looked at her again, his expression serious. "Loyalty is expensive, Alina. I hope you're not giving it away for free." It was a strange thing to say, almost a warning. He was telling her that he noticed her, that he saw the extra hours, the dedication. "I want to succeed," she said simply. Alistair's eyes dropped to her lips. "Success requires sacrifice, but be careful what you sacrifice." He reached out and adjusted the brightness of the screen, his hand brushing hers on the trackpad. Their fingers tangled for a split second, warm skin against warm skin. He didn't apologize. He simply let his hand linger there, covering hers, trapping her hand just as he had trapped her body in the room. He was testing the boundaries, seeing how far he could push before she broke. The hours bled into one another, marked only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. They had fallen into a strange symbiotic rhythm. Alistair would dictate, and she would type, or she would read aloud, and he would analyze. It was the most intimate she'd ever been with a man, which was absurd considering they were discussing corporate mergers. But the intimacy wasn't in the topic, it was in the proximity. At around 2 a.m., Alistair stood up and stretched, his shirt pulling tight across his chest. The sound of his joints popping was loud in the quiet room. "We need a break," he announced. "And food." He walked over to a sleek panel on the wall and pressed a button. A hidden cabinet opened to reveal a small refrigerator. I have leftover catering from the board lunch. Or protein bars. Your choice. I'm fine, Elena lied, though her stomach chose that exact moment to growl loudly. Alistair raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on his lips. Your body disagrees. Never lie to me, Elena. I can always tell. He pulled out a gourmet sandwich wrapped in paper and tossed it to her. She caught it instinctively. Eat. I don't run a sweatshop. He leaned against the front of the desk again, crossing his ankles, watching her unwrap the food. It felt voyeuristic, the way he watched her eat. He tore open a protein bar for himself, biting into it with a savagery that suggested he had forgotten to eat dinner entirely. So he began, chewing slowly. Tell me about the cello. Elena nearly choked on her sandwich. What? Alistair gestured vaguely toward her bag, which was slumped in the corner. I saw the rosin in your bag the other day, and your fingertips are calloused on the left hand. You play. It was a deduction worthy of a detective. Yes. I used to play. In conservatory, but I stopped. Why? The question was direct, demanding. Real life happened, she shrugged. Music doesn't pay the rent in this city. Finance does. Alistair frowned, clearly displeased with the answer. A tragic waste. To trade passion for security. He took another bite of his bar. I play the piano. Badly, but I play. It was a confession she hadn't expected. The idea of this shark of a man sitting at a piano was jarring. Does it help? She asked. With the stress? Alistair looked at his hands. It helps with the noise. My head is ... loud. The music organizes the chaos. He looked up at her, his eyes intense. You understand that, don't you? You have a loud mind too. He was dissecting her, peeling back the layers of her professional persona to see the woman underneath. I suppose, she whispered. Alistair pushed off the desk and walked toward her, stopping when his knees bumped hers. He reached out and took her left hand, running his thumb over the hardened skin of her fingertips. Don't let the city take this from you, he murmured, his voice rough. It takes everything else. Keep the music. He was holding her hand like it was something precious, his thumb rubbing soothing circles into her palm. The air in the room shifted, becoming heavy and thick. The conversation about music had stripped away the boss-employee dynamic, leaving just a man and a woman in a dimly lit room. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a man who saw her hidden parts. I need to check the archives, Alistair said abruptly, dropping her hand as if it had burned him. He turned and walked toward the wall of built-in bookshelves that lined the far side of the office. There's a precedent for this merger from '08. I have the physical file somewhere. He sounded breathless, as if he had been running. Elena watched him go, her hand still tingling from his touch. She stood up, feeling the need to move, to shake off the spell he was weaving. She walked to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass. The city below was a blur of wet lights, a watercolor painting of grays and golds. She felt isolated, high above the world, in a fortress of glass and leather. Found it, Alistair's voice came from the shadows of the bookshelves. He was up on a sliding ladder, reaching for a box on the top shelf. Can you catch? He didn't wait for an answer, sliding the heavy box down. Elena rushed over to help him, grabbing the box as he handed it down. Their hands brushed again, and the friction was electric. Alistair climbed down the ladder, stopping when he was on the rung level with her face. He didn't step down to the floor. He stayed there, elevated, looking into her eyes. The height difference was eliminated. They were eye to eye. You have beautiful eyes, Elena, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. They changed color with the lightning, gray, then blue, then silver. Elena couldn't breathe. He was too close. The smell of him was overwhelming. Mr. Sterling... A plea, she began. A warning or a plea, she wasn't sure. Alistair, he corrected softly. It's 3 a.m. The doors are locked. No one is here to check titles. He leaned in slightly, invading her personal space. Say it. Alistair, she whispered, the name feeling forbidden on her tongue. He smiled, a slow, dark smile that made her knees weak. See? The world didn't end. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on the sensitive skin of her neck. His hand was warm, his touch firm but gentle. He was playing a dangerous game, and he knew it. We should look at the files, she managed to say, her voice trembling. Alistair stared at her mouth for a second longer, then nodded slowly. The files. Right. He stepped down from the ladder, the moment breaking, but the tension remaining. He took the box from her, his fingers brushing her chest inadvertently as he did so. He walked back to the desk, but the energy in the room had changed permanently. The line had been crossed. He had asked her to use his name. He had touched her face. The professional distance was gone, replaced by a magnetic pull that was dragging them both toward a collision. He wasn't just checking archives, he was checking her defenses. They opened the dusty box on the coffee table in the sitting area of the office, abandoning the desk. They sat on the floor, surrounded by piles of yellowing paper. It felt like a sleepover, a secret fort built in the middle of the corporate empire. Alistair had discarded his tie and unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his shirt, revealing the hollow of his throat. He looked rugged, relaxed, and devastatingly handsome. Look at this, he pointed to a memo. My father wrote this. He was a tyrant. He handed the paper to her. Elena read the sharp, angry handwriting. He built this company, she noted. He built a prison, Alistair corrected, bitterness in his tone. And he left me the keys. He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable. Sometimes I feel like the warden, not the owner. Elena felt a surge of empathy. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, a spontaneous gesture of comfort. You're different from him, she said. You care. I've seen you. Alistair looked down at her hand on his arm, covering it with his own. I try to be different, he admitted, but the instinct to control, it's in the blood. He turned his hand over to interlace his fingers with hers, squeezing tight. I like controlling things, Elena. I like knowing the outcome. He leaned closer, his shoulder pressing against hers. But with you, I can't predict the outcome. You surprised me, sleeping in my chair, standing up to me, staying here. He shifted his body so he was facing her fully, ignoring the papers scattered between them. Why did you stay? He asked again, quieter this time. You could have called a friend. You could have gone to a hotel. Elena looked into his dark eyes. I felt safe here, she admitted. Even before you came in. This office, It feels like the center of the storm. Quiet. Alistair's eyes softened. I'm glad you feel safe, he whispered. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. It was a courtly gesture, old-fashioned and incredibly romantic. I want you to be safe, always. The rain lashed against the glass, a violent contrast to the gentle touch of his lips on her skin. He didn't let go of her hand. He held it against his chest, so she could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart. It was racing, just like hers. He wasn't just holding her hand, he was giving her his heart to measure. The mood in the office was now thick with a languid, heavy sensuality. The work had been forgotten. Alistair was still holding her hand, tracing the lines of her palm with his index finger. You have a long lifeline, he murmured, reading her palm like a fortune teller. And a stubborn heart line. He smiled. I like stubborn. Elena laughed nervously. I'm not stubborn. I'm persistent. Alistair chuckled. Semantics. He let go of her hand to pour them another finger of whiskey. The bottle was getting low. He handed her the glass, his fingers brushing hers. To persistence, he toasted, clinking his glass against hers. As she drank, a drop of amber liquid escaped the corner of her mouth, trickling down her chin. Before she could wipe it away, Alistair reached out. But instead of using his hand, he leaned in and caught the drop with his thumb, wiping it away with a slow, deliberate swipe. Then, shockingly, he brought his thumb to his own mouth, tasting the whiskey and her skin. Elena stopped breathing. The gesture was so blatantly erotic, so possessive, it shocked her system. Alistair watched her reaction, his eyes dark with desire. "Goodyear," he said, his voice dropping an octave. He wasn't talking about the whiskey. He shifted on the floor, moving the papers aside, clearing the space between them. He moved closer, until his legs were bracketing hers. He was surrounding her, encompassing her. "You should be afraid of me, Elena," he whispered. "I'm not a nice man. I take what I want." "I'm not afraid," she whispered back, and it was the truth. She felt alive, electrified. Alistair's gaze dropped to her lips again. "Then you're foolish. Or brave." He raised a hand to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her lower lip, pulling it down slightly. "I think you're brave." He wasn't just flirting, he was hunting. Alistair stood up suddenly, the movement abrupt. He offered her a hand and pulled her up effortlessly. Her body collided with his, soft curves against hard muscle. He didn't step back. He held her there, his hands settling on her waist, his thumbs digging in slightly. The heat radiating from him was immense. "We need to stop," he said, his voice strained. "If we don't stop now, I won't be able to let you go." He was giving her an out, a final chance to retreat to professionalism. But his grip on her waist tightened, betraying his words. He didn't want her to go. Elena looked up at him, seeing the conflict in his eyes, the CEO warring with the man. "Do you want me to go?" she asked, her voice bold. Alistair closed his eyes for a second, inhaling sharply. "No," he groaned. "God, no. I want to keep you here. I want to lock the door and throw away the key." He opened his eyes, and they were blazing. "I want to know what you taste like," he admitted, the words raw and unfiltered. "I've been wondering for weeks, watching you in meetings, thinking about it." He moved one hand up her back, tangling his fingers in her hair, tilting her head back. "You're driving me insane, Elena," he murmured against her temple. "This, US, It's unprofessional. It's reckless." He kissed her forehead, a lingering, desperate press of his lips. "And I don't care." The air in the room was suffocating, heavy with pheromones and unspoken needs. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest inside the office. Alistair's body was rigid against hers, trembling with restraint. He was holding back, waiting for a sign, a permission. He wasn't just expressing desire. He was confessing an obsession. Elena's hands found their way to his chest, clutching the fabric of his shirt. "I don't care either," she whispered. It was the catalyst. Alistair let out a low growl and buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. His lips grazed the sensitive skin below her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "You smell like rain," he murmured against her skin, "and vanilla. It's addictive." He kissed the spot where her pulse was fluttering wildly. "I could get drunk on you." His hands roamed over her back, exploring the curves of her body through the thin fabric of her blouse. He pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice ragged. "Because once I start, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to be thorough." It was a promise and a warning. He was telling her that this wasn't a fling, it was a claiming. Elena nodded, unable to speak. Alistair's eyes darkened. He reached behind her and swept the remaining papers off the desk with one violent motion. They fluttered to the floor like snow. He lifted her up, sitting her on the edge of the heavy mahogany desk, stepping between her legs. "Mine," he whispered, grabbing her thighs and pulling her flush against him. "Tonight you're mine." He leaned in, his mouth hovering millimeters from hers. She could feel his breath, hot and scented with whiskey. The anticipation was agonizing. He wasn't just seducing her. He was rewriting the rules of their existence. Just as his lips were about to brush hers, a loud crack of thunder shook the building, the lights flickering and then dying completely. The office was plunged into absolute darkness. Elena gasped, clutching his shoulders. For a moment, there was only silence and the sound of their ragged breathing. Then, the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in a dim, eerie red glow. It transformed the office into something primal, something dangerous. Alistair hadn't moved. In the red light, he looked like a devil, tempting and beautiful. "Even the universe is trying to stop us," he laughed darkly. "It won't work." He found her face in the dim light, his hands framing her jaw. "Light or dark, Elena, I see you." He ran his thumb over her lips. He didn't kiss her yet. He let the tension build, stretching the moment until it felt like a physical ache. He leaned his forehead against hers. "I'm going to kiss you now," he announced softly. "And then I'm going to ruin you for anyone else." It was the point of no return, the cliff edge. Elena closed her eyes, tilting her head up, surrendering to the fall. Alistair's grip on her tightened, and he closed the final distance. He wasn't just a CEO in the dark. He was the only thing that mattered. His lips crashed onto hers, not with the tentative exploration of a first kiss, but with the starving intensity of a man who had been denying himself for far too long. The taste of him was overwhelming aged whiskey, mint, and the dark, smoky flavor of desire that seemed to emanate from his very skin. Elena gasped, opening to him, and he took advantage instantly, his tongue sweeping into her mouth to claim her, to taste the whiskey he had watched her drink earlier. The red emergency light bathed them in a surreal, crimson glow, turning the sterile executive office into a private, illicit underworld where only sensation mattered. His hands, large and commanding, gripped her waist tighter, his thumbs digging into the soft fabric of her blouse, anchoring her to him as the world spun on its axis. He groaned low in his throat, a primal sound that vibrated against her lips, sending shockwaves of heat straight to her core. Alistair Sterling, the man who controlled markets with a whisper, was unraveling in her arms, his composure shattered by the simple act of touching her. He tilted her head back, breaking the kiss only to trail hot, wet devastation down the column of her throat, biting lightly at the sensitive spot where her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against her skin. "You have no idea," he rasped against her neck, his breath burning. "No idea how hard it is to sit across from you in meetings and look at spreadsheets when all I want to look at is this." His hands moved up her back, tangling in her hair, ruining the professional bun she had meticulously pinned hours ago. Pins clattered onto the mahogany desk, sounding like gunshots in the quiet room. Her hair fell in a curtain around them, shielding them from the rest of the office, creating a cocoon of intimacy. Elena gripped his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles, the raw power he was holding back. This wasn't just a kiss, it was a collision of two worlds, a shattering of the glass ceiling that separated the assistant from the CEO. He wasn't just kissing her, he was branding her soul with his signature. The desk was hard and cool beneath her, a sharp contrast to the searing heat of Alistair's body pressing between her legs. He pulled back slightly, his eyes black in the dim red light, pupils blown wide, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, he grabbed the lapels of his own dress shirt and ripped the remaining buttons open with a violent jerk, not caring as they scattered across the floor. He needed skin-on-skin contact. He needed to eliminate every barrier that the corporate world had placed between them. When he pulled her against his bare chest, the sensation of his hot skin against her thin blouse was electric, a friction that made her gasp. "Touch me," he commanded, his voice a rough whisper that brooked no argument. Elena reached out, her trembling fingers tracing the hard planes of his chest. The dusting of dark hair, the heavy thud of his heart that beat as wildly as her own. He hissed in a breath at her touch, his eyes fluttering shut for a second, as if he were in pain, or perhaps ecstasy. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. "I wanted to be gentle," he confessed, his voice strained, "but I don't think I can. You'll make me lose control, Elena." He lifted her effortlessly, adjusting her position on the desk so she was higher, closer to his level. His hands roamed over her legs, pushing her skirt up with a slow, deliberate friction that set her nerves on fire. He wasn't rushing anymore. Now that he had her, he was going to savor every inch of the territory he had conquered. The storm outside raged on, throwing rain against the glass in sheets, but inside, the air was thick, heavy, and silent, save for the sound of their ragged breathing and the rustle of clothing. It was a sensory overload, the smell of rain, an expensive cologne, the feel of silk and skin, the taste of forbidden longing. He wasn't just losing control, he was gladly handing the reins to her. Time lost all meaning in the crimson twilight of the office. They didn't go further than heavy touches and searing kisses, but the intimacy was deeper than anything physical. Eventually, the adrenaline began to ebb, replaced by a languid, heavy exhaustion. Alistair pulled back, adjusting her clothes with trembling hands, a gesture of care that was startlingly tender coming from him. He lifted her off the desk and carried her, not to the door, but to the oversized leather sofa in the sitting area. He sat down and pulled her into his lap, wrapping his suit jacket around her like a protective shell. "We stay here," he stated, his chin resting on the top of her head. "The roads are flooded. It's not safe to drive." It was a logical excuse, but they both knew it was a lie. He just didn't want to let her go. Elena rested her head against his bare chest, listening to his heartbeat slow down to a steady, rhythmic thump. "What happens tomorrow?" she whispered into the darkness, the question hanging heavy in the air. "When the lights come back on." Alistair tightened his arms around her, his hand stroking her arm in a soothing, repetitive motion. "Tomorrow is a problem for tomorrow," he murmured. "Tonight the world doesn't exist. Just this room." He sounded fiercely protective, as if he could hold back the dawn by sheer force of will. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the lightning illuminate the skyline, two lonely people finding solace in the eye of the storm. He told her stories about the buildings they could see, about the city he owned but didn't enjoy, peeling back layers of his persona until only the man remained. He wasn't just sheltering her from the storm, he was sheltering himself from the loneliness. Elena woke to the blinding glare of morning sun reflecting off the glass towers around them. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a piercing, innocent blue. She was alone on the sofa, covered by Alistair's jacket. Panic surged through her for a split second. Had it been a dream? Then she smelled the coffee. Alistair was standing by the window, fully dressed in a fresh shirt and trousers. He kept spares in his office suite. She remembered looking out at the city. He looked pristine, armored, the CEO once again. "Good morning," he said without turning around, sensing her movement. His voice was calm, but there was a tightness in his shoulders that betrayed him. He turned, holding a cup of coffee. "Black. 2 sugars," I remembered. He walked over and handed it to her. The air between them was charged with a different kind of tension now, that awkward, terrifying clarity of the morning after. Elena sat up, clutching the jacket. "Thank you," she murmured, taking the cup. "I sent for a car," he said, his business tone almost back in place, though his eyes were soft. "It will take you home to change." You have the day off. Elena frowned. I can't take the day off, Alistair. I have the quarterly reports due. He crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. Take the day off, Elena. That's an order. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering. I need time to think. And I can't think if you are 10 feet away from me wearing that blouse. The admission was a relief. He wasn't regretting it. He was overwhelmed by it. He was sending her away not to discard her, but because he couldn't focus on his empire while his queen was in the building. He wasn't dismissing her. He was retreating to regroup his defenses. The ride down in the private elevator was silent. Alistair stood close to her, his body shielding her from the non-existent gaze of others. When the doors opened to the parking garage, a sleek black sedan was waiting, the driver standing at attention. Alistair didn't just bundle her in. He walked her to the door, opening it himself. Before she got in, he grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. Leave your phone on, he said, his eyes intense. I'll call you. Okay, she breathed, feeling the weight of his gaze. He leaned in, kissing her cheek, a chaste, public gesture that felt shockingly intimate because of the ownership behind it. Go, before I drag you back upstairs. He closed the door and through the tinted window. She watched him stand there, a solitary dark figure in the concrete cavern, watching the car until it turned the corner. The ride home was a blur. Elena's apartment felt colder and smaller than she remembered. The contrast between the luxury of Alistair's office and her drafty studio was stark. She showered, scrubbing the scent of him from her skin, though the memory of his touch was indelible. She tried to sleep, but her mind was racing. Had she just made the biggest mistake of her career, or the best decision of her life? The phone sat on her nightstand, a silent grenade waiting to go off. He hadn't just sent her home. He had sent her away to see if she would come back. Elena returned to work the next day, her stomach hid knots. She expected awkwardness, or perhaps to be ignored. What she got was intensity. From the moment she sat at her desk, she felt his presence. The glass walls of his office, usually blinded for privacy, were wide open. He was sitting at his desk, working, but every few minutes, his eyes would lift and lock onto her across the bullpen. It was distracting, possessive, and thrilling. Every time she went to the break room, he would coincidentally appear for water. Every time she had a question, he answered it immediately via email, bypassing the usual chain of command. The other assistants noticed. The boss is on a warpath today, one whispered. He's staring at everyone like he wants to fire them. Elena knew better. He wasn't looking to fire anyone. He was marking his territory. At 2 p.m., she was called into his office. She walked in, closing the door behind her, her heart pounding. Alistair didn't look up from his papers. Lock it, he said. The call back to the stormy night made her knees weak. She turned the lock. He finally looked up, his eyes dark. I haven't done a single thing today, he admitted, because I'm waiting for you to walk through that door. He wasn't working. He was waiting for his fix. The tension broke later that afternoon. Elena was laughing at something a junior analyst from the marketing department was saying. He was leaning on her cubicle wall, flirting harmlessly. Suddenly, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alistair's door slammed open, and he stalked out, looking like a thundercloud. He walked straight to Elena's desk, ignoring the analyst completely. My office, he barked. Now, bring the Tokyo files. It was a flimsy excuse. The Tokyo files were done. The analyst scrambled away, terrified. Elena stood up, cheeks burning, and followed him. As soon as the door closed, he spun around. Who was that? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Just a colleague, Alistair. We were talking about the presentation. I didn't like the way he was looking at you. Alistair growled, pacing the room. I didn't like him leaning in. He stopped and looked at her, his mask of control slipping. I'm jealous, Elena. I am irrationally, stupidly jealous, and I don't know what to do with it. He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up. I'm the CEO. I can't be jealous of a marketing intern. But I am. He looked at her with raw vulnerability. You're mine, he said, the words tumbling out. I decided it in the storm. You're mine. He wasn't just jealous. He was realizing he had something to lose. Elena stepped closer to him, brave in the face of his anger. I'm not a possession, Alistair. You can't just claim me. Alistair laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I know, that's the problem. I have to earn you. He walked over to his desk and picked up a velvet box. He didn't open it, he just held it. I don't know how to do relationships, Elena. I do contracts. I do mergers. I do acquisitions. He looked at her, his eyes pleading. So let's make a deal. An exclusive contract. He walked around the desk and stood in front of her. I want you. Not just for a night. I want you in my life. I want you to move in. Elena gasped. Move in? Alistair, it's been 2 days. I don't care about time, he said dismissively. I care about efficiency, and I sleep better when you are there. I work better when you are there. He placed the box in her hand. It's a key, he said softly, to my penthouse. Not a diamond. I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to bring you home. It was the most romantic, practical, and insane proposal she had ever heard. He was skipping all the steps because he already knew the destination. He wasn't asking for a date. He was asking for a merger of lives. Elena looked at the velvet box, feeling the weight of the key inside. This is crazy, she whispered. People will talk. They'll say, I slept my way to the top. Alistair's face hardened. Let them talk. If anyone says a word, they're fired. If they look at you wrong, I'll buy their next employer and fire them again. It was a tyrant's promise, but it was made out of love. I can't just move into your world, Alistair, she argued softly. I have my own life, my music, my independence. Alistair took her hands. Bring the cello, he said immediately. Bring the rosin. Bring the messy paints. Ruin my perfect apartment, Elena, please. He stepped closer, invading her space. My life is cold. It's sterile. You bring the chaos. I need the chaos. He was begging her to save him from his own perfection. He dropped his forehead to hers. I'm scared, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I'm scared that if you walk out that door tonight, I'll go back to being the man I was before the storm, and I hated that man. He wasn't just offering luxury. He was revealing his emptiness without her. Elena opened the box. The key was heavy, silver, and simple. She looked up at him, seeing the fear and hope warring in his eyes. She realized then that the power dynamic had shifted completely. He was the billionaire CEO, but she held his heart in her hands. She closed her fingers around the key. I won't move in today, she said, watching his face fall slightly. But ... she continued, smiling. I will come over tonight, and I'll bring my cello. Alistair let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a lifetime. A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming him from the intimidating boss into the man who had wiped whiskey from her chin. He pulled her into a crushing embrace, lifting her off the floor. Deal, he said into her hair. I'll take it. He set her down but didn't let go. Go pack a bag, he ordered, but his tone was playful now. And Elena. She paused at the door. Yes. Lock the door on your way out, he said, winking. I have a lot of work to do, and I need to focus on how I'm going to convince you to stay forever. She walked out of the office, the key warm in her hand, leaving the CEO smiling in his chair, the same chair where she had fallen asleep and woken up to a new life. The storm had passed, but the real adventure was just beginning. He wasn't the lonely king anymore. He'd found his queen. Do you think a relationship starting in secret at the office can actually last? Subscribe for more romance stories and let me know your opinion in the comments below. See you in the next video.